The wind did not simply howl, it mourned. It screamed through the charred valleys of the northern frontier like a grieving spirit, dragging ash and sorrow with every breath. It clawed at the bones of dead trees, tore through the collapsed skeletons of once great cities, and whistled mournfully through broken towers that had once touched the sky. Fire had not just consumed the land, it had devoured history, silenced generations, and painted the soil with blood. In the middle of this graveyard, beneath a shattered obsidian spire, lay the body of a man. Kale Virex, once a general, once a noble son, once the youngest military tactician to be knighted under the banner of the High Crown. Now, little more than wreckage. His body was a map of ruin. Blood soaked the remnants of his armor. The once polished silver now scorched and warped beyond recognition. Jagged steel protruded from his thigh. His chest rose in shallow, uneven breaths. His white hair, once trimmed by royal decree, was matted with soot, stuck to his forehead with blood. His face was cut, bruised, dirt-smeared, and still. But he breathed. Somehow, against all logic and nature, Kale still clung to life. The storm above him thickened, not of water or rain, but of memory. The sky churned with a smoky gray that felt more like dying thoughts than weather. Lightning arced between clouds, but never struck. Thunder rolled like an angry drumline, as if the heavens debated whether to claim him or cast him back. Above the ruin, far beyond mortal sight, something ancient stirred. It had no name, no face. It was not a god, nor a demon, nor the will of some long-dead king. It was older than language, older than stars. It had watched civilizations rise and fall, watched the universe carve itself into flesh and ruin, and now it turned its gaze toward him, toward Kale, not because he was noble, not because he was strong, but because he was broken. And in the shattered ruins of the broken, there was space to build something new. A pulse of unseen force shimmered through the battlefield. Stone shifted, dust rose, lightless energy flickered at the edge of perception. The entity did not speak, but the world moved in answer to its presence. The dirt cracked, the spire hummed, and somewhere beneath Kale's fractured ribcage, something began to glow. It started small, just a flicker of warmth. Then a line, a mark, a rune. It drew itself into his flesh, not ink, but flame. Not etched, but burned. Spirals and angular strokes traced down his chest, across his arms, spreading like wildfire through his veins. It bypassed bone, ignored tissue, ignored blood. It wrote itself into him, layer by layer, as if restoring the blueprint of something long lost. Kale's back arched. He gasped. His scream shattered the stillness, echoing across the dead valley, but no one heard. The wind stole the sound, cast it into the distance. Then came the visions. Images poured into his mind like a storm. Cities in the sky, golems built from molten silver, smiths who shaped thunder with hammers made of crystal, forgeries the size of kingdoms, machines that bled light, books written in thought, maps of stars that didn't exist. He saw them all, and he understood none of it. Not yet, but he remembered the feeling. Creation. When the visions faded, Kale collapsed. Smoke curled from his fingertips. His pulse, once faint, now thundered. His eyes snapped open, no longer green, but silver, glowing faintly with lines of shifting light. The rune on his chest pulsed once more, then faded beneath his skin, as if retreating for now, satisfied. He had died. Truly. Not in body, but in spirit. And now he had returned. Not as the soldier they betrayed, not as the son they discarded, but as something else. Kale Virex stood slowly. Every joint ached. Every muscle screamed. But his posture was steady, a silhouette carved from flame and grief. The wind whipped his cloak behind him, revealing a ruined sword still strapped to his back. He reached for it. It crumbled in his grip. Only the hilt remained. He looked at it for a long time, then dropped it. He would build another. No, he would forge a new future. His feet moved on instinct, away from the rubble, away from the crater, toward the unknown. The world beyond the ruins stretched like a scarred parchment, blackened plains, glassed rivers, skyless forests. It was a wasteland, but something in his bones told him it was not empty. There were secrets here, ruins deeper than this battlefield, and power that did not belong to kings. His first steps were slow, but each one carried weight. With every movement, the rune beneath his skin pulsed faintly, guiding him. A direction, a pull. A purpose he could not name. Somewhere, something had awakened him, something unseen, ancient, and not entirely passive. In a ruined tower leagues away, a pair of spectral eyes blinked open for the first time in centuries. The arcane wards buried in its forgotten heart pulsed once, reacting to the same force that had marked Kale. It did not speak, nor move, but it watched. And as Kale took his first steps into the unknown, the distant presence shifted like wind in a tomb, aware now, and quietly interested. And somewhere, something waited. For him, Kale's footsteps echoed across the barren, expanse like defiant drumbeats in a world that had long forgotten rhythm. He did not know how far he had walked, only that the sky remained the same unyielding gray, as if time itself refused to move forward. The ash that covered the earth muffled every sound but his own breath, each inhale a little stronger than the last. The rune beneath his skin still pulsed, faint but insistent. It tugged at him, not physically, but like a memory on the edge of recognition. He couldn't ignore it, nor did he try. He followed, not out of faith, but because it was the only thing in this broken world that seemed to care, whether he lived or died. Around him, the landscape transformed gradually. The scorched plains gave way to jagged stone formations, ancient teeth of the world thrust skyward by time and pressure. Cracks in the earth exhaled steam. Pools of glowing mineral water simmered between rocks, humming with subtle energy. Then he heard it. A voice. Faint. Broken. Human. Kale's body reacted before his mind processed. He ran, not gracefully, but with grit, boots crunching over stone, limbs aching with every step. He found her beneath a leaning column of blackened crystal. A young woman, barely older than 20, her leg pinned beneath rubble. Her skin was smudged with soot, her eyes wide with pain, but not fear. Kale dropped beside her. Don't move. She tried to speak. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. Kale activated the bracer on his arm. The rune responded, forming a faint holographic interface. He twisted a control instinctively, uncertain how he knew, but trusting the motion. A thin blade of light extended from his gauntlet. He used it to slice through the smaller stones, prying her free. She cried out as her leg shifted. It's broken, he said, but you're alive. She stared at him. Your eyes. Kale looked away. They changed. I saw you in a vision, she whispered. In the flames. Before everything fell. He paused. Who are you? My name is Selah. That name would echo far in the days to come. He carried her for hours. Not because she asked. Not because she couldn't walk. But because he needed to remind himself what his strength was for. They found shelter in the remains of an old watchtower, mostly collapsed. But enough walls stood to shield them from the wind. Inside, Kale used salvaged debris to build a fire. He applied a makeshift splint to Selah's leg, using strips of his ruined cloak and carved metal rods. She watched him work, her gaze never leaving his face. You don't speak like a soldier, she said. I stopped being one the day they left me to die. You don't speak like a noble. I stopped being one the day I chose the forge over a throne. She smiled faintly. Then what are you now? Kale stared into the fire. I'm trying to remember. That night, she slept. He didn't. He stood at the watchtower window, staring out at the shifting mist. His bracer projected faint readings, temperature flux, seismic ripples, nearby heat signatures. Something moved in the distance, far too large to be an animal. He didn't wake her. The next day, they walked together. She leaned on a carved staff Kale had shaped from melted slagstone. Despite her injury, she refused to slow him down. She spoke often of the city she'd lost, of her brother who had vanished, of the strange dreams that plagued her since the sky had turned red. Kale said little, but he listened. He remembered how to listen. The rune guided them to a canyon split by a waterfall of molten glass. There, carved into the canyon wall, hidden beneath layers of illusion and soot, stood a door, not made of wood or stone, but of obsidian lined with glyphs. It hummed as Kale approached, responding to his presence like a hound recognizing its master. The rune in his chest flared. The door opened. Inside was darkness, pure, unending, and deep. But for the first time since awakening, Kale felt no fear. Selah touched his arm. You don't have to do this alone. He looked at her, not as a burden, but as a thread. No, he said, but I was meant to go first. And he stepped into the void. The walls closed behind him. Darkness swallowed him whole. But it was not empty. Kale stepped deeper into the ancient vault, the door sealing behind him with a soundless finality. No torch, no stars, only the faint glow from the rune etched into his chest and the occasional flicker of his bracer, which pulsed in cautious rhythm. The air smelled of dust, metal, and something older still, like the breath of forgotten gods. Each step echoed, not outward, but inward, bouncing between the chambers of his own mind. The silence in the tunnel was thick, nearly sentient, as if the walls themselves were listening. His heartbeat slowed. His awareness sharpened. This place wasn't just hidden. It was waiting. The walls began to shift as he moved. Not physically, but through memory. Ancient holograms shimmering to life as he passed, triggered by the resonance of the rune inside him. Projections formed and vanished in stutters of static and brilliance. Architects of an age before his own. Smiths with molten skin and obsidian eyes. Beings who shaped reality with tools that sang. The forge builders. He paused before one holographic sequence frozen in mid-motion, a colossal anvil, levitating in a dome of gravity-defying flame. Runes spiraled around it like moons, orbiting with mathematical precision. A single word emerged from the projection, not in his ears, but in his mind. Remember. Kale pressed forward, down winding corridors, through vaults sealed with puzzle locks that responded only to instinct. When he reached a broad chamber, the first truly open space, his breath caught. The forge was there, waiting at its heart like a slumbering star. It wasn't a forge in the human sense. Not fire and coal, not bellows and steel. This was something else entirely. A dome of crystalline pillars stood like frozen lightning, all aimed at a floating sphere of fractured stone, each fragment pulsing with a different spectrum of light. Beneath it lay an anvil the size of a horse, formed not from metal, but some hybrid of obsidian and circuitry. Veins of energy crawled across its surface, forming a pulse that matched his heartbeat. Kale stepped forward. As he did, the rune in his chest reacted violently, flaring to life, sending radiant lines of light down his limbs and through his bracer. The sphere above the anvil rotated. The forge awakened. The chamber lit up. From the stone around him emerged platforms. Arms, hammers, tools, all suspended midair, waiting for command. Lines of ancient text poured into the air like smoke, shifting in languages Kale had never learned but somehow understood. The forge did not ask him what he wanted. It showed him what he could become. Blueprints formed in his mind, not just of weapons, but of transformation. Armor that moved like breath, blades bound to the soul, constructs built not for destruction, but restoration. Designs formed by hands that had transcended mortality. Kale's hands, it seemed, because the forge recognized him. And yet, he hesitated. A voice, faint and shaken, echoed from behind. Kale. Selah. He turned, alarmed. She limped into the chamber, leaning on the glowing walls for support. Her eyes were wide, reflecting a kaleidoscope of runes and radiant geometry. You weren't supposed to follow, he said, not with anger, but concern. I wasn't supposed to survive either, she answered. But here we are. He didn't argue. Instead, he helped her forward. She stared at the forge, awestruck. What is it? Kale looked at the glowing sphere. A memory. Of what we lost. Of what we could be. She turned to him slowly. And what are you going to do with it? He stared at the anvil, then at his hands. I'm going to build a future worth surviving. He stepped toward the forge. The tools aligned. The anvil flared. He began. Metal formed in midair. Crystals spun into chambers of containment. Runes etched themselves into blueprints. Kale's mind flowed into the forge like water down a mountain. Each movement he made was instinctive, but guided, as if he were not forging a weapon, but recalling something already built in another lifetime. After hours of shaping, of molding light and ore in rune, the weapon hovered before him. A blade, not forged to kill, but to protect. Balanced, alive, bound to his essence. He reached for it. The moment his fingers touched the hilt, the forge pulsed again. The chamber dimmed. And then, the warning flared. From the corridors behind, motion. Not Selah. Something else. A dark shape. Faceless, floating just above the ground. Radiating silence like a predator in a church. The hollow had found them. Kale turned. The forge whispered one last word into his mind. Now, he lifted the blade, and the air itself held its breath. And that wasn't its full strength? Kale shook his head. No, that was a fraction, a test. It gave me what I needed in that moment. Nothing more. He let his head fall back against the column and exhaled. I don't think the forge is just a machine. Then what is it? Kale looked at her. A memory. An echo. Of something that was never supposed to die. They sat in silence for several minutes. Above them, the forge core dimmed to a dull orange, like the heart of a dying star. Tools retracted. The levitating runes faded one by one, curling into the stone like hibernating seeds. But Kale felt it wasn't finished, only resting. He rose with effort, his joints stiff, his thoughts slower than usual. Selah tried to stand, but winced sharply. Stay here, Kale said. There's something else I need to see. What if that thing comes back? Kale tightened the strap on his gauntlet. Then it'll find me ready. He walked deeper into the forged temple, the light of his bracer guiding his steps. The hallways narrowed. The architecture grew more complex, walls covered in interwoven glyphs, spiraling metal inlays that seemed to pulse in sync with his steps. The deeper he went, the warmer the air became, not from heat, but from energy, coiled and waiting like a slumbering dragon. At the end of the corridor, he found a sealed door. Not broken, not ancient, intact. Kale placed his palm against the glyph lock. The rune on his chest flared. A pulse passed through him and into the stone. Lines of blue light traced down the seams of the vault entrance, awakening circuits that had not stirred in centuries. The door opened with a slow sigh, revealing a vault unlike any other. Rows of weapons and armor floated midair, suspended in shimmering fields. Some bore familiar shapes: blades, hammers, shields. Others were incomprehensible, living tools. Crystalline matrices, bone and light hybrids. Devices that defied physics as he knew it. Kale felt his breath catch in his throat, but none of them activated at his presence. All except one. It was not a weapon. It was a bracer, sleek, silver blue, wrapped in coils of etched stone and living metal. It hovered alone on a pedestal. Kale approached slowly. The moment he stepped within reach, the bracer detached from its suspension and hovered toward him. It connected to his existing gauntlet with a soft hiss. For a moment, he saw stars, real stars, galaxies flashing through his mind. Coordinates, names, history compressed into a blink. Memories that weren't his. He staggered, nearly fell, and caught the edge of the pedestal to steady himself. It wasn't just data. It was emotion, grief, ambition, love, sacrifice. Feelings encoded in each blueprint, each archived entry. The lives of those who came before him, preserved and offered to him like inheritance. Then silence. A message appeared in the air before him. Forge heart interface synchronized. Architect confirmed. Designation: Kale Virex. Access level: root. Kale's breath caught. The forge had more to say. A new section of the vault opened. Inside, not weapons, but books. Data cores. Scrolls. Thousands of them, glowing faintly. The accumulated knowledge of a civilization. Lost before his ancestors had learned to farm. They hovered on magnetic shelves. Alphabetized not by language, but by energy signature. He stepped inside and began to read. Hours passed. Time had no meaning in the chamber. But Kale consumed information like a starving man. He learned the basics of resonance threading, of microrune encoding, of dimensional anchoring. He saw diagrams of machines that bent gravity to thought, of armor that healed memory, of swords that whispered your past to you in battle so you never forgot who you were. And then he found her name. Selah. Not written as a prophecy, not detailed, just a passing mention in a behavioral. Core note. Subject type S3A. Selah class anomaly. Potential stabilizer. He reread the entry 3 times. Whatever the forge was, it had known she would come. He looked back toward the hall, toward the sound of her breathing, faint in the distance. She wasn't a bystander. She was part of this, and so was he. When Kale emerged from the vault, time had stretched and bled together. The forge no longer tracked it in minutes or hours. It breathed in cycles and pulses, measured not by sunrises, but by understanding. His expression was different now, harder, sharper, tempered like steel fresh from the anvil. He had not simply read the archives. He had become part of them. Selah sat near the central platform where the earlier battle had been waged. She'd gathered fragments of broken runes and collapsed tool arms, carefully laying them out like bones for reassembly. When she looked up and saw him, she paused. "You were gone for a while," she said. Kale nodded. "I needed to listen." To what? He looked past her, toward the vault's heart. The truth. He walked to the edge of the platform. As he passed, sections of the forge lit beneath his feet. Recognizing his presence in fuller capacity now, a new interface unfolded before him, a branching holographic map, not just of the temple, but of the world beyond. Not as it was, as it used to be. Cities lost beneath glaciers, fortresses suspended above canyons, entire systems of transport and defense buried under centuries of ignorance. And more than that, markers, warning signs, echoes of ancient weapons sealed and forgotten. And at the center of it all, a broken core, a heart that once governed an entire civilization of Rune-Forgers. He zoomed in on it. Coordinates flared. Mountain ranges, tectonic plates, fault lines. It pulsed like a wound still bleeding beneath the earth. Selah stepped beside him. "What is that?" Kale's jaw tightened. The origin of the forge system. Where it all began, and where it all ended. She studied the glowing map, then turned to him. "Are you saying this place is just a fragment?" He nodded. "A shard. a splinter of a much greater machine. The others are buried or sealed. Some lost to time, others hidden intentionally. And the hollow? She asked. Kale's eyes darkened. It wasn't just hunting us. It was guarding something. Something deeper beneath this temple. I think the real heart is dormant. Broken. Or being kept that way. Kale gave a small nod. He stepped forward and activated the forge's lift mechanism. A low rumble filled the chamber as platforms shifted, revealing a descending spiral of stairs leading into the mountain's core. You don't have to come with me, he said to Selah. She gave him a wry smile. After everything we've seen, I'm not staying behind. Not when my name's buried in your future. Kale's lips curled into the faintest smile. Together, they descended. The lower chamber was unlike the forge above. There was no floating light, no runes in perfect order. This place had been ravaged. Chunks of ceiling had collapsed. Runes flickered like dying stars. Conduits sparked with failing energy. It was a tomb, one that still breathed. A strange cold settled over them. Not the chill of temperature, but of stillness. The feeling that they had crossed into a place, untouched by time, a sanctum not meant to be opened. And at its center stood a massive cylinder, cracked and humming with unstable power. Runes spiraled around it erratically, like a heartbeat out of rhythm. It throbbed, dimmed, and flared again, desperate to remain alive. Kale approached slowly. He extended his hand. The rune in his chest glowed faintly, hesitant, unsure. He touched the cylinder. Pain erupted through him like lightning. His vision blurred. His knees buckled. The room flashed. And then, he was elsewhere. A vision. A memory not his own. He stood in the center of a great hall of architects. Thousands of them, clad in armor of impossible make, their hands wreathed in living code. They debated, argued, fought over a choice, to shut the core down forever, or risk the awakening. He saw himself. No, not him. Another. A figure with his face. An ancestor? A previous host? The line blurred. That figure stood alone at the forge's heart, and uttered words Kale could not hear, but felt. It is not time yet. But when it is, let it choose someone broken enough to build something new. The vision shattered. Kale collapsed. Selah caught him. When his eyes opened, he gasped for air as if breaking the surface of a deep sea. The hollow wasn't the first. Selah gripped his shoulder. Then what was? Kale didn't answer immediately. His gaze lingered on the cracked core, watching its chaotic, pulsing pattern. There was something here long before the hollow. Something worse. I think the hollow is a remnant. A lock. A guardian left behind to prevent this from waking again. Selah followed his eyes. Then why are we waking it? Kale's voice was quiet. Because what's coming won't wait for permission. The forge beneath them stirred, just slightly. And above, somewhere far from the hidden vault, another presence opened its eyes. The world was listening again. And soon, it would answer. By the time Kale and Selah ascended from the broken forge heart below, the light had changed. The forge temple had once been bathed in warm golden hues, rune light dancing like fireflies through the air. But now, the ambient glow had dimmed, tinged with the faintest blue-gray shimmer. Something in the atmosphere had shifted. The forge was no longer dormant, but watching. Kale's steps were heavier, not from fatigue, but from what he now carried. Knowledge, once buried, now pulsed at the edge of his thoughts. The vision had left a burn behind his eyes, not painful, but permanent. He was no longer just the wielder of the forge. He was its heir, and its burden. Selah walked beside him, slower now, the climb straining her injured leg. But she said nothing of pain. Instead, her gaze remained fixed on Kale, studying him, noting every twitch in his fingers, every time his hand hovered near the gauntlet without touching it. You haven't said anything, she finally murmured. Kale didn't look at her. Because I don't know how. She waited. He finally stopped near the central chamber's platform and turned. There's something buried deeper beneath this mountain, he said. Beneath all of them. The forge isn't just a tool, it was a language, a system of control. And the core we saw? It's fractured because it was sealed. Not by enemies, but by its own creators. Why? To stop something from getting out. Selah blinked. So the forge is a prison? Kale shook his head. No, it's the lock, the key, and the cage. She went quiet. Kale stepped toward the forge's control dais. His gauntlet interfaced instantly. Holograms flared into life. Maps, runes, energy signatures across the continent. He magnified a distant region, beyond the frozen spires of the north, where readings spiked unnaturally. This, he said, was a sister forge. It's gone dark. What does that mean? Kale grimaced. It means either someone shut it down, or someone broke in. He tapped another region. This one's destabilizing. Rune's out of sync. Core bleed. If it collapses, the land around it will rupture. And this one? Sayla asked, pointing to a glyph blinking red on the map. Kale didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his voice was low. That one isn't part of the network anymore. It was severed, walled off from the others, because it became corrupted. By what? He looked her in the eyes. Something alive. The forge hissed softly. A low whine passed through the chamber like a distant cry. Kale turned back to the platform. If I activate the network fully, I can link to the remaining forges. Restore them. Maybe stabilize them. Maybe, Sayla echoed. But doing so also risks exposing our presence. The Hollow is a scout. The real threat. It's still dormant. Or worse, watching. Sayla crossed her arms. Then what do we do? Kale clenched his fist. We prepare. He began forging. Not weapons for war. Not yet. Tools. Armor. Devices to stabilize the village. Barriers to repel low-level threats. Drones to scout the nearby regions. He crafted for hours, his hands guided not just by instinct, but by the memory of the architects, whose thoughts lived within the forge. Sayla brought him food, bandaged his arm, said little. But when he paused, when his eyes grew hollow, she sat beside him. You're afraid, she said. Yes. Good. He looked at her, startled. She smiled. Means you're still human. Means you still have something to lose. Kale stared at his hand, at the rune that now wrapped around his palm like a ghostly tattoo. He whispered, then I won't lose it. The forge glowed brighter. A new blueprint emerged, one he hadn't accessed before. A schematic of a floating forge core, mobile and cloaked. A walking temple. He studied it. Sayla leaned in. You thinking what I'm thinking? Kale's voice was steady now. We're not hiding anymore. The forge roared to life. Not in flame, but in design. Kale stood before a projection, more complex than any he had seen before. Lines of glowing glyphs forming circuits in midair. Rotating schematics detailing the creation of a structure that should not exist. A forge that could walk. A temple that moved across land, cloaked from sight. Powered by resonance and anchored to Kale's own signature. Sayla stood at his side, her arms crossed, eyes narrowed. That's a city. Kale nodded. A sanctuary. No, she said. A challenge. Kale didn't deny it. He knew what building this meant. Not just forging tools or weapons, but awakening a myth. Something that hadn't walked the world since the architects had vanished. And it would need parts. Rare ones. He opened the interface, sifting through the list of components. Crystalline root cores, transmetal frameworks, atmospheric cloaking matrices. Many of these he could fabricate here in the forge. But some, he'd have to find. The interface showed fragments of where to begin. One such marker blinked on a map several hundred kilometers to the southeast. A ruined city, forgotten, buried beneath the dunes. Labeled in a script so old, even the forge's translation strained to read it. Exhalios. He stared at the name a moment longer. The forge highlighted it, marked it with pulsing gold. Sayla leaned forward. What is that place? Kale's voice was distant. A vault city. One of the old centers of research. It's buried, but not silent. There's movement underground. Drones still active. Something alive. And you want to go there? I need to. They spent 2 days preparing. Kale forged lighter armor. Smaller, more mobile. Designed for traversal and stealth. He built resonance-tuned boots that could scale stone with magnetic grip. Gauntlets that pulsed energy fields for short bursts of propulsion. He prepared small portable forges. Mini-fabs he could deploy in the field. Sayla didn't sit idle. She had begun studying the forge's scripts, training with the calibration tables. She crafted her first rune-threaded blade, unstable, but sharp, humming with flickers of potential. You think it'll work? She asked. Kale glanced at her. I think you'll make it work. By the third day, they stood at the temple's outer wall, looking out over the valley. The village had grown. Word had spread. More survivors had arrived, quiet, unsure, but drawn to the light they'd seen in the mountains. They brought tools, food, stories. They built shelters beside the broken walls. They spoke of the Flame Walker in hushed tones. Kale watched them. One boy ran by wearing a helmet too big for him, pretending to be a Forge Knight. Two girls drew runes in the dust, mimicking what they'd seen Sayla do. A group of men worked to reinforce the perimeter. With stone, Kale had taught them to shape with resonance pulses. "This place is becoming more than a forge," Sayla whispered. Kale nodded slowly. "It's becoming a beginning." Then he turned, fastened the last clasp on his armor, picked up the pack. The drone spindle floated to his side, chirping. "You ready?" he asked. Sayla adjusted her bracer. "Lead the way." They left that morning. The journey was not easy. The mountain passed behind them, swallowed by fog. The plains were rough and cracked, remnants of an old battlefield where rusted machines and shattered bones littered the earth like forgotten prayers. Strange winds howled through crevices that never echoed back. At night, the stars moved subtly, wrong. They camped in the hull of a broken transport half buried in the sand. Kale repaired one of the drone nodes, linking it to the Forge network. It hummed all night like a beacon to whatever might be listening. On the fourth day, they reached the ridge and saw the city, Helios, half buried in dust and time. Skyscrapers tilted at impossible angles. Massive support rings half sunken into the dunes. Black towers still pulsed faintly with energy, barely. Kale's bracer pinged. "There," he said, "the resonance point, deep beneath the center tower." Sayla drew her blade, and they descended into the forgotten dark. The city of Helios did not welcome them. It loomed like the fossilized corpse of a god, half swallowed by the sands of centuries. Skyscrapers pierced the dust like broken spears, glassless and bent, their skeletal frames wrapped in layers of wire-like roots. The deeper Kale and Sayla ventured into its ruins. The quieter everything became. No wind, no birds, no shifting sand. Only the hum of machines dreaming beneath layers of time. Their boots crunched over fractured walkways, littered with debris and the shattered remains of old drones, long since silenced. Rusted limbs jutted from alleyways. Craters marked the streets, where weapons had once fired not to defend, but to contain. Statues of forgotten architects loomed half-buried, their arms reaching skyward in silent warning. Faded murals depicting forging rites stretched across building walls, chipped and unreadable, like memories left too long in the sun. Kale activated Spindle, which projected a mapping interface. Rune scrolled across the bracer on his wrist as the drone scanned beneath the surface. "There are still power nodes running below," Kale said. "Secondary grid intact. Something's keeping this place from collapsing." Sayla swept her eyes over a line of buildings. "Or keeping it buried." They passed under a broken archway once gilded with rune steel. Ash danced faintly in the air. The forge's pulse within Kale grew stronger with each step. His gauntlet hummed, the resonance sinking with energies that hadn't been touched in centuries. He paused by a broken sign, etched with an archaic dialect. "Entry, Research Wing, Vessels and Constructs." "Sounds friendly," Salem muttered. The descent into Helios was like sinking into a myth. Every block deeper was a journey, through layered history, civilization, preserved not by design, but by a silence that felt engineered. The silence wasn't dead. It was protective, hostile, as if the city itself had been waiting. As they approached the central tower, the one half tilted. Like a dying tree, Kale halted. Movement. He raised a hand, signaling silence. A flicker passed through the air like light reflecting off oil. Then another. Something shifted behind the rubble near a collapsed skybridge. Not hollow, but old defense constructs. Dormant. Until now. One of the drones flared awake, rising on 6 legs, each joint clicking with mechanical intent. It turned toward them, its single eye lit with a red hue, scanning. It let out a low static chime, once, then again. A signal. A test. Kale tensed. "It's recognizing my bracer. Scanning lineage patterns. Good or bad?" Sayla asked, blade in hand. "We'll know in about 3. The drone pulsed with red light. "Bad," Kale muttered. It lunged. Kale dodged left, bracer flaring. A shield of kinetic energy snapped into place, just in time to deflect the drone's lashing claw. Sparks danced off stone as it struck. Sayla moved like a blur, sliding beneath its legs, slicing one joint with her blade. Sparks burst from the severed limb. The drone staggered, recalibrated. Another drone activated. Then two more. A third hovered in from above, wings flickering with arc light. They were surrounded. Kale launched a pulse from his gauntlet, knocking one construct back into a collapsed signpost. It shrieked and exploded, chunks of metal flying. He turned in a single motion and fired a resonance charge into the ground, blasting up a shield wall of debris between them and the largest drone. He grabbed Sayla's arm. "We need to get underground." Now. They bolted. The tower's base was half collapsed, its entry sealed by thick reinforced gates. But as they approached, Kale's bracer flared with light. Runes shimmered across the floor in a wide spiral. The seal recognized him, not just his forge, but his name. An access lift, sealed for untold years, ground open with a slow metallic moan. They jumped in. The drones didn't follow. The lift descended fast. Too fast. Lights flickered past in rapid strobe. Sayla clutched the side rail as wind howled around them. Kale's teeth gritted, his gauntlet interfacing with the controls to slow the descent just before impact. They dropped into another world. Below, light changed. Cold blue overtook dusty gold. Walls smoothed. Air cooled. The temperature dropped by 15 degrees in seconds. They had passed the barrier between surface and vault. The lift stopped. They stepped out into a subterranean forge lab. The chamber was circular, the walls lined with dormant machinery, whose designs surpassed even the mountain forge above. Crystalline cabling hung like vines, gently pulsing. Storage pods rested in alcoves, some shattered, others sealed. Glyphs floated midair, suspended in magnetic fields. At the room's center, a resonance core, cracked, but still glowing, hummed softly. Around it floated rings of rotating glyphs, projecting a single word in a forgotten tongue. Kale translated. Prototype node, ether chassis. He turned to Sayla. "It's one of the parts. One of the cores I need." But something else moved at the edge of the chamber. A presence. Sayla stepped back. Kale behind. He turned. A figure stood across the chamber. Humanoid. Wrapped in draping. Robes of machine-threaded silk. Its face hidden beneath a mask of runed glass. It wasn't a hollow. It was older. And it spoke. "You've come late, architect." Its voice was layered, mechanical, ancient, but also laced with something disturbingly human. The words echoed as if they'd been spoken 1,000 times before, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Kale took a step forward. "Who are you?" The figure didn't answer right away. Instead, it raised one hand. A flicker of light spread across its palm, runes shifting, resolving into a symbol Kale knew. The seal of the first architects. A symbol thought extinct. The figure lowered its hand. "I am not your enemy. Yet. But your path leads into fire. Kale Virex. And not all flames forge. Some consume." The chamber pulsed with forgotten energy. Runes glowed faintly across the walls, embedded in metal veins that hummed like distant thunder. Dust shifted in patterns not stirred by air, but by memory. This place remembered. Kale stepped toward the resonance core at the center of the chamber. Its structure was fractured, blackened in places, but still alive. Rings of light rotated slowly around its core, silent, waiting. He reached out. The moment his fingers brushed the outer ring, everything changed. A surge of heat, light, and resonance slammed into his senses. It wasn't pain, it was knowledge, compressed and ancient, erupting like a storm behind his eyes. He staggered back, breath caught, pupils dilating as ghostly strands of light laced his fingertips. His mind was filled with patterns, glyphs he'd never studied, materials he'd never touched, languages that had no name. But more than that, he understood them, not just what they were, but how they worked, how they wanted to move, where they would fail. He could see the stress fractures before they cracked, feel the rune channels asking for better flow. His eyes glowed silver for a breath, like metal catching starlight. Sayla rushed to his side. "Kale, you okay?" He blinked, then nodded slowly. I think I just learned something." "No. Unlocked something. Skill unlocked. Resonant insight. Allows instinctive understanding of rune behavior. Forge resonance and structural synergy. Does not auto-create or design. Enhances predictive accuracy, failure anticipation, and material alignment." He looked at the fractured forged chassis beside him. Without thinking, he stepped forward and ran his hand along the broken rune lattice. "This one's misaligned," he said. "But if I layer a hardened glyph under the kinetic curve, It'll redirect pressure, not amplify it. Sayla raised a brow. You've never even seen that rune before. Kale exhaled. I know, but I can feel it. The chamber brightened slightly, as if responding to his presence. He turned toward the storage pods, some shattered, others intact. His gaze focused on a gauntlet unit within one of the sealed containers. Its runes were faint, layered, damaged. He placed a hand on the container, and the rune threads bloomed into clarity. Hardened base rune, overlaid with sharpened filigree, could be layered again with a speed rune if I stabilize the frame. I can fix this. With a flick of his bracer, his tools extended, a miniature scribe, heat filament, and pulse shaper. He began to work. Sparks rose. Rune light curled around his fingers. The chamber echoed with the tap of hammers and the hum of forged tone. He layered a speed rune atop the hardened shell, knowing full well it would draw energy like a starving beast. But with proper reinforcement glyphs, the drain could be buffered through the bracer's capacitor. Sayla watched silently as Kale's hands moved like a symphony, heat, rune, metal, resonance, melding as one. Minutes passed. When he was done, he held up the gauntlet. It gleamed with reinforced edges, layered kinetic routes, and a responsive inner channel. I'll call it Virex Frame Alpha, he said quietly. Not a weapon. Not yet. But a start. The masked figure across the chamber tilted its head. You begin to remember, it said. Kale narrowed his eyes. Who are you? The figure didn't answer. Instead, it turned and stepped into a wall of light that shimmered like water. The ripples faded, and it was gone. Kale stood silently, gauntlet still warm in his hands. Whatever path he was on, it was ancient, dangerous, and echoing louder by the minute. The silence returned, but now it pulsed with purpose. Kale stood in the half-lit vault, gauntlet humming against his arm. The freshly forged Virex Frame Alpha flexed in sync with his breath, the speed rune softly pulsing along its etched spine. Around him, the forge chamber stirred, the crystal cabling faintly glowing in tandem. With his heart rate, Sayla paced behind him, hand hovering near her blade. That thing, whoever it was, it knew your name. Again, that's not coincidence anymore. Kale nodded, gaze still on the rippling light where the masked figure had vanished. They call me Architect. You think it meant your work with the forge or something else? He didn't answer. A low rumble shifted the floor beneath them, subtle but distinct. Somewhere deeper, something had activated. Kale turned. We're not alone down here. And this place, it's waking up. Sayla approached one of the still-sealed pods. These machines, some of them might still be functional, maybe even useful. Kale stepped beside her, bracer scanning. The readings returned incomplete. Partial energy. Runes are degraded. But with resonant insight, I might be able to stabilize it. Give me a minute. He placed his hand to the pod, and the world shrank. Runes flickered beneath his touch. Flow lines pulsed erratically, fading, unstable. Kale adjusted his pressure, redirecting pulse energy through a layered glyph sweep. The rune stabilizer scribed into his bracer synchronized instantly, applying a soft magnetic dampener to the flow. The pod hissed. With a slow groan of age and dust, it opened. Inside lay a partial combat exosuit, half ruined. Its helmet cracked and shoulder plating warped, but its core was intact. Kale's forge eye glowed. This isn't ordinary. That's Architect alloy. Look at the density. And these runes, chain-linked resonance nodes. I could integrate this into a full chassis. He activated his forge schematic. Spindle whirring above with soft projection light. Data flowed as he examined the core matrix. Base combat rune, tier B. Reinforcement layering, tier A. Hollow resistance glyph, dormant. Internal architecture could handle 2 additional rune layers with proper balancing. He looked at Sayla. Give me 10 minutes. She crossed her arms, keeping watch. Kale set to work. He stripped the surviving core, isolating the hardened rune base and reshaping the plating using a portable resonance buffer. Sparks danced with every strike. His fingers etched sharpened runes into the inner lining, carefully balancing their lines. Over the right arm, he embedded a high-pulse kinetic rune for blocking. Over the legs, twin-speed runes, layered with echo stabilizers to prevent muscle shredding. He reinforced the joints with micro-shielding glyphs, less flashy, more stable. As the final rune locked in, the armor clicked into alignment. The gauntlet linked with it, syncing his pulse and command frequency. A faint chime echoed through the chamber. He stepped back and exhaled. The suit stood propped on its frame, glowing softly. Virex Frame Alpha, Mark II, combat layer enabled. He slid into it. The world changed. Every motion felt tuned, precise. Not just physical, resonant. He could feel the runes responding to his breath. He walked a circle, then sprinted. The frame pulsed, his steps amplified, faster, sharper. The suit didn't restrict, it enhanced. Then the lights dimmed. The floor beneath them trembled again. From the far side of the vault, something stirred. Spindle blinked red. Movement detected. Energy signature. Architect class. Unidentified. Kale tensed. Weapons up. Sayla drew her blade. The vault doors at the edge of the chamber cracked open with a scream of ancient metal. And from the shadows beyond, something stepped through. Not hollow. Not machine. It emerged slowly. First, a silhouette. Tall, humanoid. But segmented like armor that had outgrown its host. Then came the glow. Pale gold light poured from cracks in its body. Thin slits along the chest and joints. Pulsing like a heartbeat. It was clearly built, but not by modern hands. Its metal surface bore etchings worn down by centuries. Glyphs scrawled in an ancient dialect crawled across its plating in slow, living patterns. Kale stepped forward instinctively. Runes in his new armor humming like a low choir. That's not a hollow construct. Sayla moved beside him, blade drawn but uncertain. It's not attacking. Yet. The figure halted just inside the vault, tilting its head with an eerie, mechanical grace. Its voice issued without movement, like thought made sound. You trespass on sacred echo. You wear resonance not bound to you. Kale stood his ground. This forge called me. I didn't steal anything. I rebuilt what your kind left to rot. The figure's chest flared with a pulse. And suddenly the chamber's light dimmed as if the core itself held its breath. Rebuilt. Or reawakened. It stepped forward, each footfall leaving behind a shimmer of residual rune energy. You speak the tongue. Wield the core. Your cadence is flawed, but not forgotten. What are you, Kale Virex? Kale didn't respond right away. His gauntlet clicked faintly as he channeled a low defensive charge. I don't know what I am yet, but I know I'm not leaving this forge in ruins. The figure lifted one hand. Instantly, the resonance field in the room twisted. The walls flickered with old glyphs reactivating, defensive signatures, warning matrices. Spindle buzzed wildly in Kale's ear. Architect class construct deploying field overlay. Brace. Kale launched backward just as a kinetic blast lanced across the chamber. The fight began. Sayla rolled sideways, her blade deflecting a secondary pulse that vibrated with sonic force. The figure moved like memory, slow at first, then impossibly fast. It didn't run. It transitioned. From stillness to strike. From silence to impact. Kale triggered the speed runes in his boots and blurred left. The energy cost was immediate. His forge core flared, draining. He slashed with a pulse blade etched into his gauntlet. The strike connected. Sparks flew, but the construct's outer layer held. It absorbed the blow and redirected the energy back through a mirrored rune circuit. Kale felt the backlash hit his chest plate like a hammer. He rolled to absorb the force, coughing. It's copying my output. Sayla lunged, her blade striking true this time, cleaving through one of the glyph lines on its arm. The creature hissed, not in pain, but disruption. It stumbled. Kale saw his opening. He rewrote a glyph. Mid-motion, converting the gauntlets. Echo rune to a feedback loop. Then, with all his weight, he punched the construct's exposed joint. The rune detonated on contact. The creature was thrown backward, crashing through a containment pillar. Silence followed. Runes flickered erratically on its frame. Then the light in its eyes dimmed. Kale didn't move for a breath. Then two. Sayla exhaled. Well, that was new. Kale stepped closer. It was guarding this place. But it didn't recognize me fully. Something's off. He knelt beside the disabled frame. The glyphs on its chest began to fade. But one word lingered, burned brighter than the rest. Catalyst. Kale stood slowly. That's what this forge is. Not just a ruin. A trigger. He turned to Sayla. If this is the beginning, then we just lit the first signal. Something between. Part 13 of Arc-Eye, Cinematic Rewrite, fully expanded. The word lingered in Kale's mind. Catalyst. Even after the light dimmed and the Sentinel's core went cold, its presence echoed. Not in sound, but in the forge itself. Its very walls throbbed with a subtle vibration, as though the act of defeating the Guardian had loosened some hidden knot. Behind him, the chamber's rune circuits surged once more, brighter than before. Kale's fingers trailed across the sentry's frame. The construct's shell had cooled, but the glyphs etched across its chest plate flickered with fading intent. Not just a word. A warning. A key. He stood and turned to Selah, his voice low. It wasn't just protecting this place. It was holding it back. From what? She asked. Kale looked up. From the vaulted ceiling above, several glyph plates peeled back like petals. A massive mechanism, hidden before now, began to rotate, slowly at first, then with a resonant hum that shook dust from the walls. Light poured from above. A single rune, a world rune, flared into view, suspended in air like a blazing sigil. Spindle scanned. Unknown designation, but magnitude, architect-grade. The resonance spread like a tide. Walls shimmered. Doors once fused by time slowly began to unlock. Deep within the forge, mechanisms ancient beyond memory stirred. The awakening had begun in earnest. Kale felt it in his bones. Not just an echo, this was a reactivation. The forged city beneath Helios wasn't a ruin. It was a sealed living node, waiting for a bearer to reignite it. And now Kale had. He approached the floating sigil. Its light danced across his armor. A low thrumming sound aligned with his pulse. When he reached toward it, the sigil collapsed into a beam of light that lashed into his bracer. Runes spun wildly across the display. Catalyst node accepted. Initiating architect substructure mapping. A grid projection of the forge flared out in all directions. Sublevels, core silos, transit hubs, weapon foundries, energy reservoirs. The entire substructure had come online. Selah gasped. It's a city, beneath the ruins. Kale nodded. Not just a city. A forged city. One of the last. He turned to the console, now emerging from the floor. Interfaces lit up, rune slots rotated into place. His gauntlet began syncing automatically. A new directive glowed across the display. Stabilize outer perimeter. Reconstruct defensive layers. Establish control node. It was no longer about exploring ruins. This was now a reclamation. Kale's voice was steady. I can bring this place back. Selah blinked. You're going to restart a city? With what? Just you. Kale didn't answer at first. His hand hovered over the central command glyph. I'll forge what I need. He pressed the seal. The forge core rumbled. Energy surged. Hundreds of side conduits activated. Mechanical drones, forgotten for ages, powered up with blinking lights. Conveyors, lifts, gantries, all waiting for instruction. Kale stared into the awakening storm. He wasn't just walking through history anymore. He was rewriting it. The awakening was not silent. As the command seal finalized, the forge core groaned to life. A bass hum echoed through the chamber, as if the very bones of the city exhaled for the first time in centuries. Along the far walls, glyph channels lit like rivers of molten silver, flowing outward into the darkness. Spindle hovered at Kale's shoulder, its tone sharp and urgent. Architect command node synchronizing. Power grid stabilization in progress. Estimated core capacity at 62%. Kale watched the holographic map expand. Each blinking node was a system rebooting, some half-lit, others dormant, others blinking with warnings. Dozens of structures fanned out beneath the ruins, layered like a hive. This place is massive, Selah murmured. Kale nodded. And it's only a fraction of what it was. The forge drones stirred. First came the surveyors, hovering orbs of crystalline alloy with multi-directional lenses. They scanned Kale and Selah before dispersing through the city, mapping damage and assessing resources. Then came the reclaimers, four-legged, constructs carrying rusted tools and half-functional welders, clicking as they walked like reanimated scavengers. Kale interfaced with the console. Spindle, bring up structural data. Focus on perimeter breaches, power conduits, and any dormant defense rings. Processing. On the projection, a cluster of sublevels blinked in red. Breaches, collapsed tunnels, areas marked with the symbol for hollow incursion. He narrowed his eyes. They got in. Selah crossed her arms. Or something worse did. Kale turned to the forged drones now assembling in the vault. He grabbed a reclamation bracer from one of them and activated the forge protocols. Runes spiraled into place. Blueprint detected. Wall stabilizer matrix, Tier 2. Resource inventory, sufficient, reclaimed alloy, flux crystals, basic conduits. Status, ready for construction. With a series of swift gestures, Kale directed the reclaimers to patch the outer breach nearest the vault. Holographic schematics displayed layer-by-layer repair instructions, which the drones followed with near-instant synchronization. Sayla watched as they began. You really can command it all, can't you? Kale shrugged slightly. Only because it remembers me. Or someone like me. He activated another console. This one was dormant at first, but his bracer, still pulsing from the catalyst link, overrode the lock. From the floor rose a pedestal. Upon it, a black capsule with golden ridges and 3 embedded rune locks. Spindle word. Unregistered device. High-density forge core matrix detected. Kale approached and unlocked the seals. One by one, the rune locks rotated and clicked open. A hiss of pressure escaped as the capsule unfolded, revealing a forge core. Unlike anything he'd seen before, it was alive, pulsing, breathing. Its surface was smooth obsidian, but glyphs ran across it like veins of light. This wasn't just fuel. It was an awakened core, a hybrid of resonance and sentient calculation. Spindle confirmed it. Catalyst class forge heart. Estimated potential output, 370%. Capable of self-tuning and modular energy transfer. Kale's hands trembled. This could power a city. Or a war machine. Sayla stepped closer. Or both. Kale stared into its pulsing light. I'm going to rebuild the forge. Not just for us, for what's coming. She tilted her head. You still think this was all chance? He shook his head. No, I think this was placed here. For someone like me to find. But whoever left it, they were preparing for something big. Kale looked back at the map. The next layer was labeled only in ancient glyphs. Forge Heart Depths, restricted access. He smiled faintly. We're just scratching the surface. The forged city had begun to stir, but Kale was already looking deeper. Beyond the humming halls. Beneath the repair drones and command relays, a path waited. A path sealed by memory and fire. The console labeled it only as Forge Heart Depths, restricted access. But something about the phrase made Kale's skin prickle. Like a word spoken in a dream that shouldn't exist. Spindle, Kale said. What do we know about the Forge Heart Depths? The drone hesitated. Architect node indicates 3 internal barriers. 2 mechanical. 1. Encoded biologically. Kale frowned. As in DNA locked. Incorrect. As in soul linked. Kale glanced at Sayla, who raised an eyebrow. What does that even mean? I've seen runes that respond to thought, Kale said slowly. But this is different. This is ancestral, tied to the original architect bloodlines. He took a breath and touched the projection. The barrier lit up, a rotating triple glyph pattern, pulsing in time with his bracer. The forge beneath reacted. A platform slid open behind the console, revealing a circular descent tube lined with glyph rings. A faint blue light swirled inside. Not a mechanical lift. A grav channel. Kale stepped forward, armor reacting with every pulse of the system. If I can't access the forge heart, I'll map it manually. Sayla, stay topside and keep the drones repairing breach sectors. We can't risk another incursion. She crossed her arms. You're going alone? He looked back with a half smile. You always said I was reckless. I meant brave. Kale stepped into the grav channel. Instantly, he felt the shift, gravity nullified. His descent controlled by pulses of magnetic force. The world narrowed into light and echo. Each ring he passed whispered a different rune as if reciting old truths. He landed softly. The Forge Heart depths were not what he expected. Smooth obsidian walls spiraled outward in symmetrical rings. But it was the silence, an absolute, reverent silence, that made him pause. Here, the city didn't hum. It listened. Floating runes hovered in the air, each slowly rotating in a fixed orbital pattern. These weren't just commands, they were memories. Runes that carried intent, fragments of thought. Kale reached out to one. It brushed his gauntlet. A flash of a forge lost to ash. A child crying beside an anvil. A gate shattered by something not of this world. Kale pulled his hand back. They stored experiences here. Like echo recordings. Sentient rune sequences. The central chamber loomed ahead. Massive, circular, layered like the rings of a tree. In its heart, a pillar of light, pulsing, waiting, the true forge heart. But surrounding it were 6 sealed pedestals, each marked with a different symbol. One resembled a hammer, Another, a shield. The others, unrecognizable. Spindle descended beside him. Access restricted. Awaiting rune-bearer resonance. Kale approached the closest pedestal. The hammer. His bracer pulsed with warmth. The symbol ignited. The entire room trembled. A deep tone echoed across the chamber like the toll of a buried bell. A voice spoke, not aloud, but through the rune itself. One awakens. The rest must follow. Kale turned toward the Forge Heart. He wasn't just reclaiming this place. He was reactivating an ancient order. And now that it had started, the other 5 were watching. Part 16 of Archive, Cinematic Rewrite, fully expanded. The pulse from the hammer pedestal reverberated through the depths like a beacon. The floating runes shifted in rhythm, spiraling faster, weaving new patterns into the air. Kale's gauntlet blazed with resonance. Glyphs on his bracer synchronized with the Forge Heart's energy. Lines of light reached outward from the pedestal toward the central pillar. Then the pedestal began to open. Mechanical layers retracted, revealing a suspended core, shaped like a hammerhead, forged of alloy black as night, but threaded with golden veins that shimmered with breath. It floated forward as if drawn by Kale's intent. Spindle scanned. Artifact class, tool detected. Architect lineage confirmed. Imprint bond pending. Kale reached for it. The moment his fingers touched the surface, heat surged through his body. Not pain, but memory. The hammer's presence surged into him like a silent scream. Flames. A forge the size of a mountain. Hundreds of smiths crafting runeplate for titanic machines. Orders shouted in a language that hadn't been spoken in centuries. And then, collapse. Silence. Kale staggered. Spindle hovered near. You are imprinting with an architect artifact. Neural echoes will fade. Do not let go. I wasn't planning to, Kale muttered. The vision stopped. Kale breathed heavily, the hammer now solid in his grasp. It wasn't heavy. It was perfectly balanced. Designed not just for war, but for shaping. It bore a name etched beneath the layered runes. Iristra. Kale whispered it. Iristra. The moment he said the word aloud, the other 5 pedestals flickered, briefly responding to the activation. Only one remained truly lit, but they had heard the call. Kale looked at the hammer again. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a crafting focus, a tool used by the original rune-bearers to channel complex sequences into physical form. A master forger's key. He holstered it across his back, and as he did, the entire Forge Heart chamber adjusted. A new access path lit up behind the central light. Pillar. A spiral walkway that descended even deeper. Kale didn't hesitate. The lower level opened into a smaller vault, less grand, more functional. Tables, tool racks, archive pillars. An ancient workshop sealed beneath the city. Blueprints floated in midair, detailing machines, armors, even biomechanical weapons far beyond anything Kale had seen. One projection caught his eye. Virex Forge Walker, Class 1, Mobile Repair Chassis. Experimental. Kale smirked. They were designing walkers? Underground exosuits. Spindle chimed. Local construction parameters detected. Partial parts found in storage. Assembly possible with reinforcement alloy and architect seals. Kale's forge core burned with purpose. He walked to the fabrication platform and summoned a layout for the walker frame. Using Iristra, he began etching runes in real time, layered. Guidance runes for leg stabilization, shield pulse enhancements, and a magnetic core lock to link with his personal resonance signature. Each strike of the hammer wasn't just noise. It shaped the very data in the air, encoding runes mid-swing. Kale whispered with every strike. Shape, bind, seal, balance. Hours passed like minutes. When the lights dimmed and the core spun down, Kale stepped back. Before him stood the first forge walker. Tall as 2 men, sleek and angular, built for narrow tunnels and harsh terrain. It bore Kale's personal seal, burned into the chest plate with a tri-rune overlay. He turned to Spindle. Let's see if this thing walks. Kale stood before the forge walker. The chamber was quiet now. No thrum of hammer, no cascading rune fire. Just the soft pulse of the newly awakened walker, glowing faintly with layered energy. The core at its heart pulsed in sync with Kale's bracer. Spindle, Kale said, stepping toward it. Run diagnostics. The drone buzzed forward. Walker power source stable. Kinetic balance at 87%. Armor grade. Composite tier with internal rune threading. Activation threshold reached. Kale grinned. The cockpit hatch at the back of the machine unsealed with a hiss. Inside, controls hummed with low resonance, awaiting command. He climbed in, locking his gauntlet into the input cradle. Runes reacted instantly, syncing Kale's neural pathways with the walker's feedback system. His vision blurred, and then realigned. He saw through the walker's HUD, a faint translucent overlay across his natural sight. Diagnostics scrolled. Vitals. Shields. Rune harmonics. The mech had no weapons yet, but its armor and strength were designed for deep travel and defense. Kale flexed. The walker stepped forward. Clank. The floor shook ever so slightly. Clank. He adjusted movement sensitivity, allowing for smoother gait. Within minutes, he had control down to instinct. Spindle hovered beside the walker's head. Primary functions calibrated. Shall I notify surface command? Not yet, Kale replied. I want to test it first. Take a deeper route. A secondary access tunnel opened on the chamber's far end, sealed until now. The Forge Heart had recognized the walker's activation and granted permission. Kale marched forward. The tunnel was rougher than the previous levels, less refined, less symmetrical. More like ancient excavation sites, carved before the city's perfection. Wall glyphs flickered with intermittent power, as if unsure whether to wake or stay buried. Kale passed forgotten rooms, shattered labs, hollowed storage vaults, even fragments of old armor hanging on broken hooks. And then, movement. Kale halted. Spindle flared a red warning. Resonance anomaly detected. Signature, non-rune, non-hollow. Unknown. A shadow moved ahead. Kale raised the walker's arm in defense. Runes along the plating glowed brighter, hardening. From the far end, something stepped into view. It was humanoid, but taller than Kale's walker, clad in armor so ancient. Its surface was layered with calcified stone and embedded crystal veins. Where I should have been, there were only 3 glowing lines. The figure didn't attack. It spoke. So the forge breathes again. And a child dares to awaken Irishtra. Kale gritted his teeth. Who are you? The figure tilted its head. I am Sentinel, prime of the Silent Ring, left to sleep beneath the city until the hammer returned. Now it has. Spindle's voice dropped an octave. Historical match found. Silent Ring, an order of sentient guardians bound to the original architects. Roll, containment, and judgment. Kale's hands tightened on the walker's controls. You planning to stop me? The sentinel raised a massive hand, and with it, a set of runes ignited around his wrist. Only if you prove unworthy. The tunnel rumbled. Kale rolled the walker into a ready stance. Then let's find out. The forge walker braced as energy rippled through the corridor. Sentinel Prime stood motionless for a moment, then shifted its stance, drawing a wide-bladed weapon from its back, a colossal sword, infused with old resonance, its edge glowing with crystalline threads. Kale didn't wait. He surged forward, powering the walker's legs with layered kinetic runes. The ground cracked beneath each step. His first strike, a hammering shoulder rush, slammed into the sentinel's torso. Sparks flew, but Sentinel Prime barely moved. It countered. A sweeping arc of its blade met the walker's raised arm. The impact sent Kale flying back, skidding across the stone. Warning glyphs lit up across his HUD. Shield layer breached. Armor integrity at 74%. Kale gritted his teeth. Spindle. Overclock the pulse dampeners. Feed all excess charge into balance runes. Confirmed. Kale repositioned. This wasn't just brute force. It was a duel of resonance. Sentinel Prime raised its offhand, summoning 4 floating rings inscribed with judgment runes. They hovered around its frame like orbiting blades. Kale activated the walker's rune spike system. From the mech's forearms extended glowing blades. Forged earlier, but left inert until now. Sharpened rune cores ran along their length, built for utility. Now repurposed for battle. He charged. A clash of ancient metal and modern craft. Kale ducked beneath the sentinel's vertical strike, his walker rolling sideways with surprising agility. With a twist of his gauntlet, the walker slashed the sentinel's side, sparks and fragments, flying as Kale channeled a sharpened rune burst. The sentinel stumbled, but only for a breath. Its rings pulsed, releasing a concussive wave that staggered Kale. The walker buckled, power flickering. Kale slammed his fist into the cockpit's interface. Come on, don't fail me now. He activated Irishtra. The hammer flared to life on the walker's back, sinking directly into the chassis. Kale routed its core into the walker's forged systems. The result? Resonance overload. The walker's limbs burned with layered glyphs, every rune shining like a star. Kale roared, "This is my forge." He dashed forward, faster than before, slamming the empowered hammer into Sentinel Prime's chest. A shockwave rippled outward. The Sentinel staggered, sword falling from its grasp. The ancient guardian dropped to one knee, then planted a hand on the floor to keep from collapsing. Its rings shattered. Kale stood above it, hammer raised. But the Sentinel did not move. Instead, it spoke. "You do not yield. You do not break. Then the fire remembers you." Its chest opened, exposing a hollow chamber with a glowing fragment inside. A shard of architect crystal. Spindle chirped. Resonant key acquired. Access to lower forge archives granted. Kale stepped back, lowering the hammer. The Sentinel's body slumped, still active, but now resting. Watching. "Go deeper, forge bearer. The others will test you harder than I." Kale nodded slowly. "Then I'll be ready." The gate at the tunnel's end hissed open, not with gears or hydraulics, but with layered resonance. Like the exhale of a sleeping forge waking to an old name. Runes flowed across its surface, then vanished as the portal recognized Kale's resonant key. He stepped through with the forge walker, the passage sealing behind him. The lower forge archives. The air changed. No longer dust and stone, but pressure, warmth, a subtle pulse in the walls. Kale felt it through the walker's frame. This place was not abandoned. It was waiting. Rows of archive pillars stretched into the distance, rising into darkness. Each was inscribed with thousands of runes. Some glowed faintly. Others flickered like memories trapped in glass. "Spindle," Kale said quietly, "what is this place?" "A memory vault," the drone replied. Each pillar a preserved sequence, weapon designs, city schematics, failed prototypes, battle logs, personal journals, a living record of the architects. Kale dismounted from the walker, walking on foot now. The floor shimmered with faint light. As he passed each pillar, fragments lit up, responding to his presence. One projection appeared, a man with glowing arms hammering a blade, so long it spanned a room. Another, a forge walker 10 times larger than Kale's, rising from molten steel. Another still, a map, a world map, and it was shifting. Kale froze. "Wait, rewind that." Spindle isolated the memory. The projection replayed, a global schematic detailing continental drift. But then, instead of natural movement, the map broke. Apart, fracture spiraling. From a central point, a supermassive impact site. "That's not a natural event," Kale whispered. Spindle confirmed. Memory classified as Event Echo, Shardfall. Kale watched as cities crumbled, oceans twisted, and fragments of the world fell into the sky. The hollow invasion wasn't the beginning. It was the aftermath. Kale's hands clenched. "They never told us this. No record topside ever mentioned Shardfall." "There were reasons," said a voice. Kale turned. From between the pillars stepped a figure, tall, cloaked in archival fabric lined with moving glyphs. Its face was half flesh, half metal, with one eye glowing softly. Not a hollow, not a full construct. Something in between. Kale instinctively reached for Irishtra. "Easy," the figure said. "If I meant harm, the Sentinel would not have granted you the key." Kale didn't relax. "Who are you?" "Archivist Lyaran," the figure replied. "Last of the Mind-Woven. I was tasked to watch this vault until the line of Virex returned." Kale's heart skipped. "You knew my name?" "I knew your echo. Your signature. The Forge recognizes you, not because of your blood, but your burden." Kale narrowed his eyes. Why was Shardfall hidden? Lyaran stepped to the projection. Because the truth would shatter what remained of civilization. The Hollow weren't born of darkness. They were once us. The projection shifted, showing beings shaped like humans, but radiant, casting runes like breath. Then corruption, implosion, rebirth into what Kale knew as Hollow. They were wielders who burned too bright. They sought to ascend past runes, into pure resonance. But they forgot one truth. Everything forged must cool. Kale stood silent. Lyaran continued. "You cannot defeat them by killing. You must reshape them." Kale's forge core flickered in response. The deeper truth wasn't about war. It was about redemption through creation. And Kale was the last smith capable of trying. Kale stood still beneath the memory light. The truth of Shardfall burned in his chest, an ancient betrayal, a cataclysm buried beneath dust and centuries. And now, the Hollow were no longer shadows in the dark. They were echoes of what his kind had once been. He turned to Lyran. You knew all of this. And waited. I waited, the archivist said, because you were the first to descend without greed. The first to build before demanding. That means the Forge is listening again. Kale frowned. What happens now? Lyran raised his hand. The archive floor shimmered. A seal pulsed outward. The walls moved, revealing a long-forgotten staircase descending even further. The Forge Heart has layers even I've never seen. But something stirred when you took Iristra. The core is aligning. Kale hesitated, then stepped forward. He left the Forge Walker behind. This path was meant for feet, not machines. Each step down felt heavier than the last, not physically, but emotionally, as if the air thickened with memory, regret, and lost hope. The runes along the walls flickered with warmth and sorrow. At the base of the stairs, Kale entered a wide cavern. Not stone, not metal, but crystal. The Forge Heart's true center was alive with resonance, glowing in slow pulses. Hundreds of floating shards rotated. Above a central forge, each, one containing a flickering memory. Kale approached, drawn by instinct. The forge was simple, ancient, but it felt familiar, like something from a dream passed down through blood. Spindle hovered close. This is where they shaped the first Forged-born. Kale blinked. The what? Living weapons. Armor-bonded warriors. But not in the way the Hollow are. The Forged-born were volunteers, crafted by merging resonance with will. They fought the Hollow in the first years. Most perished. The project was sealed. Kale stepped into the forge ring. The crystals responded. Visions surged. A girl forging her own gauntlet, crying tears of joy. A boy shaping armor to protect his dying village. A team binding their souls into runes to face a flood of darkness. Then silence. The forge went cold. Kale whispered. They gave everything. Lyran nodded behind him. They were not gods. Just people who refused to let the world end. Like you. Kale stepped up to the crystal array. Can it be done again? With the right will, Lyran said. And with a core. Kale removed his gauntlet. Beneath, the forge mark on his palm glowed faintly. The mark he was born with. The one that flared only when he created. He placed his hand on the center crystal. The forge came to life. Light surged across the walls. The floating shards locked into new orbits. A forging ring rose from the ground. Blueprints, options, armor patterns, all flooded his vision. Kale whispered, let's build something worthy. The crystal forge thrummed as if recognizing Kale's intent. Blueprints circled his vision, each one more intricate than the last. Armor sets bound to speed, others forged for elemental absorption. Some focused on battlefield utility. Each design pulsed with a different resonance. But Kale didn't choose the flashiest. He chose what fit, a design based on balance, survival, and rune adaptability. A modular set that could evolve. One that carried the signature of a builder, not just a warrior. Begin integration, he said. The forge responded. Runes ignited across the floor as crystals spun faster, their resonance harmonizing into chords that shook the cavern. From the center ring, raw essence, metallic dust, glowing particles, broken fragments of failed attempts, rose into the air. Kale guided it. With Iristra in hand, he began the true craft. The hammer pulsed as he brought it down, once, twice, each strike embedding new runes into the forming armor. Hardened runes at the chest, kinetic absorption on the legs, twin acceleration layers around the calves. Speed runes overlapped with weight-balancing glyphs. He added a bracer core forged from repurposed defense tech scavenged in Exhalios. Inside it, he embedded a dual-channel resonance socket, allowing him to switch rune sets mid-combat. Every swing was precise. Every rune was layered with intention. He added sharpness glyphs across the gauntlet's knuckles for blade-edge punches. Ether stitching between armor joints for quiet, fluid movement. Memory coil plates in the back for absorbing small impacts and preserving kinetic force. Sweat beaded down his brow, not from heat, but from the emotional weight. He wasn't just forging armor. He was answering history. Finally, he stepped back. The armor floated before him, still warm with glowing glyphs, black with silver etchings. The chest plate bore no sigil, only the silent flare of resonance along the collar. Like breath in the cold. Spindle, he said, status. Armor integrity, 94%. Energy threshold optimal. All runes stable. Estimated field performance, high tier adaptability. Kale reached forward. The pieces assembled around him, not as a burden, but as an extension of his will. Light shimmered as each segment locked in place. The final piece, his helm, snapped into place with a low, echoing hum. Vision adjusted. Breath steadied. In that moment, Kale felt something ancient settle over him. A lineage not by blood, but by choice. Lyran stood at the edge of the forge. The fire remembers. Kale nodded. Then let it burn in me. Kale took his first step in the new armor. It didn't feel like metal. It felt like movement, like every rune, every layered thread of glyphs, had learned how he moved, breathed, thought. His stride was silent, balanced. The floor beneath him responded differently now, like it recognized the signature walking across it. Spindle hovered overhead. Power output stable. Synchronization, 97%. Kale looked down at his gauntlets. The knuckle runes shimmered, casting soft light. He flexed his fingers, fluid, weightless. The bracer core's dual-channel socket glowed, flicking between the two current rune sets, Velocity and Bastion. He turned to Lyran. I'm going back up. Lyran nodded solemnly. Then the test begins. The forge cavern shook. Runes along the walls ignited. First a soft flicker, then a storm of light. The central forge behind Kale dimmed as its energy was redirected. A gate opened at the far end of the chamber, unveiling a long, vertical corridor lined with sentry hollows, dormant, but now twitching. Spindle spoke sharply. Alert. Initiation protocol active. Ancient trial resuming. Kale didn't hesitate. He sprinted forward, his speed amplified by the acceleration. Runes around his calves. Within seconds, he reached the base of the corridor. The hollows stirred. One dropped first, blade in hand, screeching in an unnatural pitch. Kale's instincts kicked in. He activated the Velocity rune channel, his vision sharpening as the world slowed. Dodging to the left, he ducked beneath. The first hollows swing and struck. With a gauntlet punch to the side, the sharpened glyphs did their work. Sparks exploded from the hollow's side as it was flung into the wall. Two more jumped from above. Kale rolled, switched to Bastion mode, and let the armor absorb their strike. Kinetic plates caught the impact, storing the force. He redirected it upward in a thunderous punch that shattered one hollow and staggered the other. He moved like a smith who had built his own weapon. A dozen more hollows began to descend. Kale's breath steadied. I forged this to climb. He jumped. Twin runes beneath his boots flared, propelling him upward. Mid-air, he grabbed a collapsing beam and launched himself to the next level. Hollows followed, shrieking and leaping, but Kale was faster. Smarter. He wasn't just running the gauntlet. He was the gauntlet. Each tier he climbed, the pressure built. Hollows adapted. Some fired projectiles. Others ignited corrupted runes. Kale burned through both rune channels, sometimes swapping mid-strike. When he finally reached the top platform, 27 hollows lay shattered behind him. Spindle chirped. Trial completed. Kale dropped to one knee, chest heaving, but smiling. He had reforged himself. Kale stood at the summit platform, the trial chamber quiet now. Shattered hollow frames lay twisted below, like broken sculptures of a forgotten era. Above, a shaft of pale light filtered through cracked stone, illuminating Kale's armor like he'd stepped into the center of a rune sigil. He inhaled, not from exhaustion, but from something else, clarity, purpose. Spindle hovered at his shoulder. Armor integrity at 72%. You are still combat capable. Kale grinned. Good, because I think we've got more climbing to do.